So, Tony, you are warmly welcomed. And as Yulia told, we remember your session in the project Mastery of Coaching, and we were deeply impressed. And so I think that's enough from me. The floor is yours. You're welcome.
Thank you. And hi, everybody. It's great to see you all again. Some new faces, a lot of names and faces I recognize from before. So let me just check. Tatiana, I have 30 minutes to talk and then about 10 minutes for questions, right? Okay. So this is going to be interesting because this is my, oh, hang on a minute. The computer's asking me to confirm that I'm going to be speaking Russian. I'm just going to confirm I'm not, and I'll do English because I'm better at it. Yeah. Okay, there we go. It now knows who I am. So this is not my normal topic. You all know that I'm normally talking about advanced coaching skills. But I'm going to confess today, I'm going to try and give you an unbiased view of the future, the present and the future. And it's unbiased because it's balanced, because I am biased on both sides. I had my first introduction to non-directive coaching in 1984. And I've been running my coaching practice for 25 years. But I also started my career in technology in 1971. So I'm both. I'm a coach and a techie at the same time. I will say today, my deep expertise is in the coaching. I'm not deep expertise in current technology. I use it, I work with it, I test it, and I play with it. But I'm going to try and give you a real view, and it's interesting. So let me just share my slides. And those of you who know me know that sharing slides is not my great thing. Let me just hit the right buttons and see if I can make it work. Oh, and it's Microsoft software, so how do I make it go to full screen? Okay, that's worked so far. So we're going to talk a bit about the role of AI in coaching as I see it, and the role of the coach in an AI-driven world. I'm going to have three main areas. The first area is business support, and I've got very little to say about that. Then we're going to look at the scenario of AI alongside coaches, AI instead of coaches, and then what I think the future is going to be. Business support, do it. Whether you're a coach or whoever you are, if you're running a business, working in a business, if you're not utilizing AI in a number of ways, then wake up, smell the coffee, get on board and do it. I'll give you one simple example. In our Simplicity of Mastery program, I run 60 to 90 minute tutorials 5 times a month with live coaching groups from around the world. And what I was doing 2 years ago was running the sessions. I had my notepad beside me and I was taking notes, and then afterwards listening to the recording and trying to come up with some summary of what was that session about. You know, a couple of 100 words which would describe what was that last 90 minutes about. And I did it, but it wasn't wonderful. Today, my workflow is I download the recordings of the tutorials, the Zoom file. I plug it into Descript, which gives me a transcript of the session. I then put the transcript of the session into ChatGPT with some very specific instructions, and it gives me instantaneously a 200-word summary of what's in the session. that I use to post on the members area and send out as notifications. And then it gives me a short LinkedIn post that I can put to just try and attract people's attention and get more business. You know, we've gone from lots of effort to just a little bit and a slick little routine. So if you're not using AI as business support, wake up, smell the coffee, and do it. So let's look at AI alongside coaches. There are a few applications I've seen going. So note-taking. Those of you who know me know that I teach and advocate as a coach, don't take notes. But some of you like to take notes and give follow-up to clients. So the way I teach it, it's like, okay, after the session, take notes. Now, what you can do now, with your client's permission, and I have to confess, if you're a life coach, this is probably easier. My corporate clients, not very keen that notes are being taken by an AI tool, but it's doable. And if you do it under the right agreements and protections and contractual obligations, then it will give you something that you can use afterwards. Please do bear in mind, in the same way as when I use it to do the summaries of our tutorials, it'll only be about 95% right. There will always be one little error that it makes. It just connects the dots wrongly, and you have to find, otherwise you're going to blow your credibility. So use, but with caution. One application I think is very good is if you do have accepted, approved recordings of coaching sessions, you can use generative AI to do an analysis, to find patterns. Are there things that you're stuck in a routine of doing? Are there moments where you're doing too much talking? So with the right prompting, you can use it for session analysis. Area 3 is assessments. Now there's 2 or 3 pieces of software out there at the moment which say, upload your coaching recording to us and we'll give you an analysis against the core competencies. I'm going to raise a flag on this one and say, be very, very careful. The best of them that I've tested don't catch everything and are not that accurate. They certainly can't go beyond the PCC markers. Some of the newer tools that have come out are just plain rubbish. No, I'm not going to name names, but I'm going to be blunt about what's out there. Be careful. It sounds credible. It's a bit like when ChatGPT and the other products hallucinate. Sounds good, but it's actually wrong. So I'll give you 2 examples. I was mentoring a PCC coach who'd been a PCC for several years. We had a recording that we know was validated by an assessor as PCC standard. And we submitted it to one of these tools and it came back and said that she had a 60% chance of passing an ACC. I gave it some proven MCC recordings and it came back and said, this has a 70% chance of passing a PCC. So the accuracy is not there. And as we'll talk about later with the various AI coaching bots, a lot of this stuff is being developed by people who have some exposure to coaching, but are not deep experts. They're tech people. And this one particular one that said we all fail, it then goes on to start saying, you said this, and instead of that, you should say that. Now, that sounds helpful, but what you're actually seeing there is a tool developed by a non-expert is now trying to teach you how to coach. That's dangerous. And the things it was suggesting, you could actually tell which coaching models they had based its instructions on. And whilst you might say, well, that's not a bad thing, well, let me just share with you. One of the bits of ICF documentation says, if a coach is unable to move beyond standardized coaching questions or a standardized model, this will result in a score below MCC. And years ago, when I was an assessor, when we did the exams live, the way they should be done, two of us were in the room. So one pure observing, one being coached and also observing and making notes. When the candidates left the exam, the first question we asked ourselves was, can we tell which coaching school they went to? And if the answer was yes, because they'd used a particular model or questions or whatever, then they failed because they don't meet the mastery standard. So you don't want to have a tool that's stuck down at that lower level, assessing you against the core competencies. So it'll be a neat idea, but only when the tools are better and only when they are developed by people with the expertise. Now, the third bit, the learning tool, or as I put there, the panic button. So the reason I call it the panic button, back in, I think 2009, I think it was when the first iPad came out, I designed a thing called the coaching app. And it wasn't there to coach, it was a support tool to be used by a coach and a client, whether it was a manager and a subordinate or an external coach. It had the ability to do nudges and reminders. But when we analyzed it, we thought that was the great feature, the follow-ups and helping keep people stay on track. The interesting bit was we'd also built into it a thing I called the panic button. Because in a corporate environment, people getting coaches because they're moving up a level in leadership are generally needing to learn something as well. So 10, 15 years ago, I had a number of senior exec coaching clients each year. We ran public programs and we taught them our leadership stuff. And then we coached them after that on putting the stuff into practice. When we had the coaching app going, we just took all those bits and we took all the standard questions people ask, like how do I give people feedback and how do I manage performance in my team? And we built it into the app so you could go and hit, literally, we had a big red panic button, press the panic button, ask a question, and it gave you an answer. And the interesting bit, when generative AI came along, we knew we were going to have to shut the app down and use latest technology. When we asked, what's the most favorite part of the app? We thought the nudges and the follow through would be the helpful bit. It wasn't. 90% the panic button, getting on-demand help as and when I need it. That was what everybody wanted. That's what everybody was using. So there is a place, because if you're coaching in an area, you can't coach across a knowledge gap. Coaching is the process of making people think. Thinking, innovation, creativity, problem solving is connecting previously unconnected data in your brain. And if somebody has a piece of data missing, they're missing some knowledge, no amount of coaching can cross the gap. So sometimes it's coach, teach, coach. And again, you'll see the ICF guidance. You have to help your client find the resource, find the place where they can get that information. Now, I'm fortunate for leadership, I have that intellectual property. So I can do coach, teach, coach. And what we did for a while, we did the training classes separately. Then I spent a few years with engagements where it was very clear that some of the time in the engagement will be spent coaching you, some will be spent teaching you if there's stuff you need to know. And it's important that you know when you're coaching and when you're teaching. None of that means giving advice. Giving missing knowledge and then coaching somebody on how to use that knowledge is not advice giving. And as we see some of our professional associations getting a little bit paranoid about the difference between, say, coaching and mentoring, they forget the distinctions. Mentoring itself is not about giving advice. Mentoring is about coming from a body of knowledge and experience, sharing that as and when appropriate. And for our corporate clients where I teach mentoring programs, the bulk of the time what we're doing is teaching them the coaching skills so that when you share that experience, you trigger the thinking so that they then start creating new neural pathways for themselves as they figure out, how would I use that information, that knowledge in this context? So learning tools are good. I'll come back to that for you because I've got something you can have. Nudges. There are, we proved it before. Some of the newer tools, Coach Hubs, support, what do they call it? Amy. They're doing things like that, building the nudges, help implementing learning. So people are playing with it in the AI space. I think it's a good application. If you don't have a way of implementing knowledge, it's wasted. It goes away. So nudges are a great application, and we're playing with that in the AI space as to how we can automate that and make it much more effective. So those are the major areas around having AI alongside coaches. Let's go and have a look at, I tell you what, before we go, here's a little thing for you. So if you want to try the panic button for yourself, go to either tonylatimer.ai or profitableleadership.com/AI. I've made my first AI tool completely free. Now, for coaches, it's not so that you can get the answers that your clients have about how do I do my leadership stuff, but you could use it, for example, and say, okay, Mr. AI tool, I've got a client with this situation, and I want them to retain ownership of solving the problem. So if I describe the situation to you, could you tell me what questions could I ask to trigger their thinking so that they stay in ownership of the solution? So that becomes a really effective way to use the tools. Go get it, go play, it's yours. Now we get to the real fun bit, AI instead of coaches. What I'm seeing on social media, LinkedIn, places like that, is a very binary approach. So you would have thought logically there'd be the for, against, and as well as. But here's the interesting thing. I've seen nobody publicly saying they are for AI coaching. Nobody. We've got a few people who are going against very, very strongly. Cardon, for example, one of my fellow MCCs, he explains it quite well, and he laments the fact that automation is going to take coaching away from the deeply human connection. And I'll come back and address that. Tatiana Bakarova, she's written some nice articles, very strong. She actually refers to it as the shitification of coaching. So now, here's the interesting thing. You can't stop the tide. So back in my original homeland in England, we had we've had some pretty bad kings over the years. We had one called King Canute, who actually thought he could stand on the seaside and forbid the tide from coming in and flooding the land. It didn't end well, it didn't work. The AI genie is out of the bottle and it's not going back in. So I hear what people are saying in the against it camp, but that's what the world is, and you've got to decide, what are you going to do about it? The other interesting bit, and so another point, when these people who are very deeply expert talk about this, you get a lot of less experienced coaches jumping on the bandwagon and commenting on social media and saying, yes, coaching is a human thing. You can't take that away. You can't take away the human approach. And intuition, what about that? So here's the thing. Coaching exists at two levels: Newtonian physics and quantum physics. And the vast, vast majority, even MCC included, are doing it at Newtonian physics. Now, what we call intuition, 95% of the time at least, is just pattern matching. Your brain is just hearing something and it goes, yeah, I heard all that before. But here's the thing. Once you recognize that most of your intuition is pattern matching, you then wake up to the fact that computers can do pattern matching on bigger data sets faster. And what is the stuff we've heard over our lives that tells us, that informs this intuition? Well, it's all the stuff about personal experiences, professional experiences, emotional experiences. But guess what? You have all put all that stuff on your social media. AI has access to all those professional, personal, and emotional experiences that you've uploaded. Look at LinkedIn. 10 years ago, LinkedIn, strictly professional. Now, people are sharing deeply personal stuff. And I'm not judging or criticizing that either way. It's just that's the way it is. Therefore, the AI coaching bots have got access to all of that stuff. So they have access to all the world's shared personal, professional, and emotional experiences. I think their pattern matching is going to be way better than yours as one individual human. Here's the other interesting thing. Nobody's just for it. There's an awful lot of people in the as well as. And you see all these articles which say, oh, AI is going to supplement human coaching. It'll be alongside the coach. Here's the challenge. Spend the next month. So on places like LinkedIn and Instagram, whatever you read and watch and express interest in, you get more of. So I get a lot of this stuff. I have yet to hear an opinion about AI bots supporting human coaches from anybody who hasn't got a vested interest in developing AI bots. Every single one of them basically look at it and say, it's going to be alongside the humans. And guess what? They're building a business model with AI coaching bots. So my suggestion is think about what you're reading and follow the money. So example, let's look at the big three platforms: Coach Hub, BetterUp, Ezra. Coach Hub, 2 infusions, as I recall, over the last year, totaling about $150 million plus of investment for development of AI in coaching. So if the positioning is this is just a tool to sit alongside the human coaches, then that's fine. So how many human coaches have we got? Well, 50,000 on ICF, at some level of credential or membership or credential, a few thousand more from the MCC and a couple of others. So 60, 70,000 coaches globally, maybe. How much are those people going to pay for a tool that sits alongside them to help their human coaching? So what do you pay for ChatGPT, something that you might use 2 or 3 times a day? 10, 20 bucks a month. 50,000 coaches worldwide willing to pay, if they all chose to do it, $10 to $20 per month for an AI tool is not going to give a return on investment from 180 million money put into the development. It just doesn't add up. It really doesn't add up. There is no way they're putting that kind of money into something unless they intend for it not to require the human coaches. So, I'll give you another one. Ezra, another one of the platforms, they're doing a great job. They got some superb awards. I think they got a Guinness Book of Records award this week for a project that had them at Microsoft that had the most people coached. But look at the numbers. It was in the several thousand people coached in their project. But do you know how many employees Microsoft has? It's more than 10 times that. So with one of the biggest companies globally who's adopted one of those platforms, less than 10% of their employees actually are being reached so far. So the growth potential is huge. And the other interesting thing from one of those platforms is one of them had their head of coaching on, I heard them on a podcast 2 weeks ago. So the podcast was the Harvard Institute of Coaching. And I'm going to, forgive me, on my screens, I've got a few documents I'm going to pull up and quote from. So the comment was, the bulk of the market prices, as the volume of coaching continues to increase, prices are still going to come down. The rates individual coaches can charge will come down. As the number of coaches increases, the supply goes up, the demand determines the price. So fee rates are going to continue to come way down. However, he then goes on to say, I think we are beginning to reach a point where we probably have enough coaches in the world, enough human coaches. There are many people who are filling their days with coaching, but there are many coaches I know who would still love more coaching work. So I think we are not going to lose access to human coaches. They will still be there. But we're beginning to reach a stage in our developed world, in organizational coaching, where we're reaching peak coach. Now that's really interesting. So one of the people who is saying tools alongside the human coach is also saying we've got enough human coaches already, we don't need any more. But yet those organizations are still training new coaches. So it just doesn't add up. Let me just look at the reality for you as I see it. AI coaching has a basic flaw because nobody in the history of coaching ever tried to do coaching via text. So the interface that they've all started with is wrong. Generative AI goes the wrong way. Generative AI was designed to answer questions from a knowledge base. Non-directive coaching is about asking questions. in brackets, probably from an informed knowledge base. So the hard part we've seen in the first 2 years of the AI coaching bots is it goes the wrong way. So they're having to do a lot of work to control what AI was designed to do in the generative sense and make it do the opposite. And that's coming along. But again, the problem with it is that there are very few true coaching experts involved in trying to do this. So you can start to see the models that they're building it on. Now, the other problem with AI coaching bots is coaching is the process of making people think. That's it. However, the AI coaching bot as it exists at the moment has no way to detect if you're thinking. At the Newtonian physics level, you ask a question and somebody responds instantly, that's probably no thinking triggered, no fresh thinking. To know that you've made somebody think, you're going to see a pause. You're going to see muscle changes on the face. You're going to see eye movements to varying degrees depending on exactly what you've triggered. Things can only exist on the wavelength that there is a receptor there to detect them. Let me illustrate that. You've probably heard the ancient Buddhist question, which is supposed to be posed as a very deep piece, which says if the tree falls in the forest and there is no one there to hear it, does it make a sound? Well, I can tell you the answer to that, it doesn't. Because sound, as you and I understand it, is something that happens on an electrical signal in a neural pathway in your brain. It's internal to your mind. When the tree falls, there are absolutely silent compression waves in the air. And when they reach ears, then your ear, the components of your ear, the hairs, the bones, they vibrate, creating an electrical signal which goes to your brain, where an image, if you like, of sound is created. So the tree falling in the forest is silent if there is nobody there to hear it. Things can only exist on the wavelength that there is a receptor there to detect them. Probably none of you at the moment have got a radio playing. So there's no radio. The reality is every one of us is being bombarded by hundreds of radio wave signals. We just don't have a receptor switched on to pick them up. So fixing AI becomes really simple. Really, really simple. But before we go to fixing AI, let me just talk a little bit about the market, the opportunity. I'll give you a few examples. So I did some research over the last week, checked as thoroughly as possible, taking, again, the example of the 3 big coaching platforms and said, like, what's their number of customers? And I compared that to the number of large organizations, which is generally their target. If we look just at the United States, let me scroll down and get you the numbers. Just at the United States, big organizations, let's say 5,000 to 20,000 employees, and you know, and they serve people like Microsoft, the people up in that segment. There are about 50,000 companies of that huge size globally. And based on the best information available on the internet, if you add all three platforms' customer bases together, they're addressing 8% maximum of those available global large companies. 8%. If we then go down a scale and say, what about companies with between 100 and 5,000 employees? And again, available data says globally, well, just in America, there's 1.2 million companies of that size. There are so many of these companies who are not yet using coaching. I'll give you an example really close to home here in Singapore. Now, those of you who know Singapore, we're small. We're so small, if you've got a decent bicycle, you could cycle around the entire country in a day. And I've done it. It's doable. We have SME, small medium enterprise, which is companies below 200 employees and 50 million turnover. The vast majority of those, like 98%, are very small. Handful of people, 100,000 turnover. But if we just take the top sector, the ones with 100 to 200 employees, there are 20,000 of them. Now, I can tell you from personal experience, only a couple of those use executive coaches. So just in this one tiny little country, 20,000 companies. Now, if you've got 100 to 200 employees, would there be an owner and maybe 2 or 3 managers who could benefit from coaching? I think so. But they currently don't use it. Probably they don't know it's available. Probably if they do know it's available, it's expensive. But just imagine when coaching is known and becomes available to everybody, the thing will change. Never mind Ezra saying we've reached peak human coaches. If every organization with more than 100 employees just said one person at the top of that company could do with a human coach, we don't have enough coaches by a long shot. So let's look to the future. Where's it going to go? First, they've got to fix the bots. Now, this is actually simpler than you think. It can't detect silence. If you give a coaching bot access to a video camera and a microphone, it can now track silence. It can now track facial movements. And all it needs to know, it doesn't need to know what you're thinking, it just needs to know you are thinking. And if it knows you're thinking, it can then wait, pause, and maybe even eventually comment and say, interesting, I saw something happening there. What's the current thinking? Now, not rocket science to do this. It's just nobody's done it yet. But just imagine what will happen when somebody who understands coaching well enough sits down with an AI provider, then, well, guess what? We only need 2 companies to adopt it. You just need full intelligence to have it built in. You just need Microsoft Copilot to have it built in. And then suddenly, everybody who uses a computer in their work suddenly has a coach, an AI coach available to them. That's it, job done. Now, people will then start using it. And that is when you start to see maybe in the 200-man company, the owner, the person at the top of the company saying, yeah, this is useful, but it's not quite giving me what I need. I'm getting stuck. Oh, there's a thing called a human coach who could actually come and do a little bit more and go a bit deeper for me. So I think the future is bright. I think the opportunity is massive. I think we are going to see a huge growth in the adoption of coaching. The vast majority of it will be taken by the AI coaching bots, no question. But it will then leave the door open for a relatively huge opportunity for the human coaches. But here's the thing. We've got to fix the coaches. Because currently, coaching, it happens at Newtonian physics, quantum physics. You can get through ACC, PCC, and even over the bar MCC with Newtonian physics. The only difference is at the MCC level, you've got to let go of the models. That being the case, it won't be long before we can have AI bots that can coach at that level. So if you want to be a human coach who survives and thrives, you've got to coach at a higher level. You've got to move to the quantum physics. You've got to learn to use energy in your coaching. And those of you who've been, I think you've probably heard talks recently by my good friend Fran Fisher. You've probably seen the demonstration of one of your fellow Russian coaches coaching very strongly at the energetic level and coaching Fran. Okay? That's the level of stuff you need to learn. You've got to come and learn how to coach at the energetic level so that you can rise above, because nobody's going to pay you even a couple of $100 for a coaching session if the bot that's built into their desktop software can handle most of what they need. And let's not forget, most of people tend to publicly denigrate it's not transformational coaching, but the vast bulk of coaching that happens in organizations isn't transformational coaching. It's people getting coached for performance. It's people getting coached through a job transition. It's people getting coached to meet their goals. All that stuff can be done. The human is needed for the underlying stuff. So that's my 30 minutes. Thank you for your time and attention. And Tatiana, I'm open to questions.
Tony, we have 2 minutes and 1 question, and I think it's okay. Question is in Russian, written in Russian, so I'll read it in Russian, and Natalia will translate. Вопрос от нашего уважаемого MCC, от Ольги Герасимовой. У нас достаточно коучей в мире или достаточно профессиональных коучей? И когда вы говорите о снижении цены, от какой средней планки мы считаем? В 2013 году средняя цена для PCC была $150 евро в час по США и Европе. Потом в 2016 ее считали как $250 евро в мире. Но при этом в 2017 и 2019 году коучи Азии, Африки говорили о $100-150 для PCC как хорошей цене. Информация с международных конференций. Как вы оцениваете на сегодня, о какой средней цене за профессиональный коучинг можно говорить, если мы не берем MCC звезд?
Well, so the problem is a reasonable number of coaches these days get their work through those big platforms. And those big platforms are paying if you're lucky, $100 a session, right? If you go out and sell yourself as a coach, you can get more than that, no question. So I think the mistake a lot of coaches have made. So first of all, despite what Jonathan Passmore said on the podcast, where he said there's already enough coaches in the world, human coaches, that's rubbish. You know, as I said, look at the growth opportunity I've outlined. There's lots more. Now, if you aimed at those small, medium-sized companies, the 200 employees up to the 5,000, ask yourself this: is the CEO going to pay the coach less than they pay their hairdresser? There is no way that you can have a problem getting a few $100s per session minimum. So, A, we don't have enough coaches. We also, B, the vast majority of coaches we do have still do not coach at a high enough level. And I'm going to add something on here. I think something's going to change with the credential levels over the years, because if an AI coaching bot can coach at ACC, PCC level, then baseline MCC has got to be where the humans begin. You can teach mastery to beginners. I hope that helps.
Yes, Tony, thank you very much. Unfortunate time. That's all with our timing. Unfortunately, it was a great pleasure to see you here. Thank you for your time. Thank you for your contribution to the development of our Russian-speaking community all over the world. And I hope it's not the last time we see you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thanks so much.
Yeah, thank you. Bye.